Okay, so this is Bible study for April 25th, 2021, and it's our Fulfilled series and continuing in John chapter 15, verses 18 through 25. And the text says, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father as well. If he had not done among them, if I had not done among them the works no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. As it is, they have seen, and yet they have hated both me and my Father. But this is to fulfill what is written in their law. They hated me without reason." Number one says, what does Jesus say to his disciples in 15:18? If the world hated, that's the underlined word there, hated you, keep in mind that it hated me first. So we're emphasizing that word. He doesn't say it disliked them. Um, if you don't know what hated means it really means murderous. It means that we wish that didn't exist, that we want to do something to silence what I'm hearing. And so obviously they hated Jesus because they killed Jesus. And so love is the opposite of hate. And love is to look out for the other person's best interest first. Hate is to look out for my best interest, even if it means killing the other person. And I guess we could say my supposed best interest, because oftentimes our hate does not result in the best for us, but it's what we thought would be best for us. Number two, why would the world hate Jesus' disciples if we are so loving? A, they hated Jesus first. So that's exactly what's in there. It may not really feel like it answers the question, but it is what it says right there in the text. So there's none of us that are more loving than Jesus, I don't think. But they hated Jesus even when he was willing to die for them. So to think that we could be more loving in some way than him, and they just wouldn't hate us then, is foolishness. B, well, verse 19 says that it's because we don't belong to the world. If we did, it would love us as its own, and that's correct. That's also in the text. We don't belong to the world. We're not of the world, and so our ways are different and honestly bring conviction. But if we were of the world and we did what the world expected, then the world would love us. See, John 7:7 says the hate comes from the fact that Jesus testified that their deeds were evil. Perhaps that is why they will hate his disciples also. So you can go back and read John 7:7, but it says, this is why they hate me, because I testified that their deeds were evil. So when we stand up and say what's going on here is wrong, the people that are doing wrong and don't want to change hate the person that's pointing it out. D, jealousy and insecurity, which are also true. Why do we hate the person that pointed out the wrong in our life? Because We think that they're tearing us down, even if the intention was to lift us up. We're not confident in being able to right the wrong. We're jealous. We want to be considered righteous. And that person who is pointing out our unrighteousness looks like the righteous one. And we need to, we're jealous of that. We want to stop that and we want to take their place. But we want a shortcut to it, right? Because if we really wanted to be the righteous one, then we wouldn't have to destroy the other person. We want a shortcut, and it's easier to destroy the other person and take their place in seeming righteous than it is to do the hard work of doing the right thing. Number 3, how do people feel about you? See also Luke 6:26. So I just want to say we can go back and read Luke 6:26, but Luke 6:26 says, beware when all people speak well of you. So it's a dangerous thought when everybody seems to like you and everybody says good things about you. Because in order to do the right thing, sometimes people are going to get mad, and we can't help it. We don't try to do it, but sometimes we can't help it. So A says they hate me because I look so much like Jesus. Obviously, that's what it should be according to this text, but I'm not sure that that's often the case, even for those of us who think it's the case. B, they love me, and frankly, I'm a little upset that you think they should hate me. So that's a lot of our answers. And then C, they hate me, but I'm not sure it's for the reasons we're talking about here. So some people hate you because you're a jerk. And that's not what we're talking about here. So Jesus loved and yet was hated. We sometimes treat people bad and then everybody hates us and we say, yeah, that's just because I'm so good. I'm like Jesus. And for the most part, I know very few people that are really, truly hated because they're so much like Jesus. Too many of us are hated because we're jerks, and then we claim that it's because we're like Jesus. But what we're doing doesn't look much like Jesus at all. Number 4, what does verse 20 mean? Verse 20 says, remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. So it says, A, I don't know. Maybe that's true. B, if we follow Jesus, we will receive the kind of treatment he received. And that's true. And what he says is, if they hated me, they'll hate you. If they obeyed me, they'll obey your teachings too. So if we're like Jesus, then they will respond to us the way they would respond to Jesus. But a lot of times they're responding to us differently. They like us but hate Jesus' teachings, or they like Jesus but they hate us. And so then we have to ask ourselves, it's possible that they don't really understand Jesus and his teachings, and they're misunderstanding, but a lot of times it's because we don't look much like Jesus to begin with. See, if we think that we can preach the gospel without anyone being upset with us, we might think that we are better than Jesus, and that's not the case. So when it says a servant is not above his master, we need to remember we're not better than Jesus. And when Jesus spoke the truth, there were people that hated him. So if we think we're going to escape without anybody hating us, then we think we're better than Jesus at this. Number 5, does this mean that everyone will hate us? Yes, no, explain. So it says right in this text that some will obey our teachings just the way they obeyed Jesus' teachings, because they love Jesus and they love his teachings. So they'll follow us too, because our teachings are Jesus' teachings. So everybody won't hate us. So it's really hard to make these judgments about ourselves based on the general public opinion. So I don't suggest that, but I would say that you probably ought to find some people in your life that you look to as godly and that you can really trust to be the voice of Christ in your life when you're having trouble hearing the voice of Christ otherwise. Now, hopefully we're hearing directly from Christ, but there are days when we struggle to hear the voice of Christ, and we need somebody that we really trust to speak the words of Christ. And if that person looks at us and says, "Bro, you're wrong," if that person looks at us and say, "Hey, they don't hate you because you're telling them the truth. They hate you because you're being a jerk," then we need to listen to that person. Maybe we have two or three people that we respect their walk with Christ. Maybe they don't even know each other, so they can't be talking about what they're going to say to us, and we ask them independently. Somebody that's willing to tell us the truth, and God's truth, the voice of Christ in our lives. And hopefully we can hear the voice of Christ, and we already hear it before people speak it to us. But those people are going to be the people that we trust, um, to give us a little pushback when we think we're hearing Christ, but maybe we're off base. And that's really helpful. It's not always helpful to listen to what every single person in our lives says. I heard a pastor say, "I put people in my life that I'm willing to listen to who love God, love me, and love our church." And because he's a pastor, he feels like those are three important things that he has to be confident in a person, and then he has a group of people that those things are true, that speak into his life. It's really easy, however, to get away from listening to that group of people when public opinion differs one way or another from those voices. And so, number 6 says, "What if people who love the Lord and obey his teaching," verse 20 and 21, and see Wednesday's text, "don't like us or follow our teaching?" So it's possible that people love the Lord and obey his teaching, but they're not following us and they don't like us. And we need to ask, if we are confident that they love the Lord, and this is what I was just saying, then we need to consider if we're the ones that are off base. And pastors should consider this, and lay people in the church should consider this, and we should have somebody that can speak those words of life into our lives and help us know whether it's people don't want to hear the word of God, or whether it's we're not speaking the word of God. Number 7, why does Jesus say, according to verses 22 through 24, the people are guilty of sin? See James 4:17. That's a cross-reference text. And James 4:17 says, "If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them." So Jesus says in this text in 22 through 24, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse." So it's saying the same thing that James is. It's saying they wouldn't have been guilty of sin because they weren't in rebellion, but I came and I showed them the way and I told them the truth and they rejected it. Therefore, they are guilty of sin because they know the good they ought to do and they're not doing it. And so these are really important texts in understanding, particularly a Wesleyan understanding of sin. Um, that we're responsible for what God has revealed to us, and sin in a Wesleyan context is not just missing the mark, because you could miss the mark and not even know about it. And many people, I think, from a Calvinistic and Baptist type background, will define sin as missing the mark. And therefore, then they say things like we sin every day in thought, word, and deed because we live in a fallen world and a lost world. And I understand their reasoning, but I also understand that the Wesleyan perspective is a very practical perspective, because it talks about not just philosophically what is sin, but what sin are we really held accountable for. And Jesus says that we're guilty of the sin that he reveals to us, but we rebel against, and we're held accountable for that. And those who killed Jesus heard the truth and rebelled against that truth. So number 8 asks, is there anything that God has revealed to you recently that you are having trouble responding to? Yes, no. What is it? So is there something in your life that he's showing you that you need to fix? And you're going to be held accountable for it now, because you know now. This is an opportunity for us to share it for the purpose of accountability, prayer, support, help in following through with the commands of God. And then number 9 asks, what choice will you make? So you have the choice to obey or to reject what Christ is showing you. What will you do?